Hello, everybody. Hi, I'm Stephen Sachs, the Artistic Director of the Fountain Theater in Los Angeles, and welcome to Theater Talk. We're streaming live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Zoom, and our Fountain Theater website. And if you're watching on Zoom and you have a question for one of our guests, just type it into the Q&A balloon at the bottom of your screen. Or if you're watching on Facebook, you can type your question in the chat. So today is very exciting for me personally. For one reason, we are closing out Pride Month. June is Pride Month because 51 years ago, the Stonewall riots happened on June 28th, which was just 2 days ago in 1969. And that protest 51 years ago for equal rights for gays launched a revolution that would change the world. And we are also acknowledging this month the landmark Supreme Court ruling protecting the civil rights of gay and transgender employees in the workplace. And we honor this month the passing of playwright and activist Larry Kramer, the author of the landmark play, The Normal Heart. And who better to celebrate Pride Month to recognize the equal rights for LGBTQ citizens and to mark the cultural importance of plays with gay themes than our guests today. So it's my pleasure to welcome for the first time gathered together virtually or in person, a reunion of the company members from the Fountain Theater productions of The Normal Heart and Daniel's Husband. And here they are. Hey, everybody.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey, we made it. We all did it. It's incredible. Look at all of you. You all look so fantastic. Great.
Hey, Dan.
Hi.
Awesome.
My babies.
Exactly. You look fantastic. Oh, this is so fantastic. So wonderful. These two productions just meant and mean so much to us at the Fountain Theater, and just have particular meaning for us now as we celebrate the end of Pride Month. So before we get started, why don't we just quickly do a roundabout, and everyone can just quickly introduce yourselves and just say your name, the play that you were in, and if you can remember the character that you play. We're all getting a little older now, I know, and it was a few years ago. So why don't we start with Ed? Ed, you want to start?
Hey guys, my name is Ed Martin, and I was Barry, the Randy Barry, and Daniel's husband.
Yeah, Barry.
Ooh. Is that me next? Hey, I'm Jose Fernando. I played Trip in Daniel's Husband. I was in love with Barry. It was great. It was fun. It's good to see everybody.
Lisa?
Hi, I'm Lisa Pelikan, and I was in The Normal Heart, and I played Dr. Emma Bruckner.
You did, indeed.
I did.
And you did it brilliantly, by the way. Brilliant. To look at, what was it again? Jeff?
Hi, I'm Jeff Witzke. I was in The Normal Heart. I played a few roles. I played David, Hiram, and the exam doctor.
And Verton.
I am Verton Banks, and I was in The Normal Heart, and I played Tommy Boatwright.
That's right. That's right. And Tim?
Hey, I'm Tim Cummings. I played Ned Weeks in The Normal Heart, and I played Mitchell Howard in Daniel's Husband.
Yay. And Mr. Dan?
Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Shaked, and I played Craig and Grady in The Normal Heart.
Hey!
And Ray?
Hi, everybody. I'm Ray Paul Antonio. I was the infamous understudy in The Normal Heart, covering several roles, many talented gentlemen on this Zoom. Jeff Witzke, Verton, Dan, Tommy, Mickey, Craig, Hiram, Fred, who's not here today. We love Fred, and I covered him as well.
Bill?
Hi, I'm Bill Brochtrup, and I played Felix in The Normal Heart and Daniel in Daniel's husband.
Yes, you did indeed.
Yeah.
And Michael?
Hi, I'm Michael McKeever. I wrote Daniel's husband.
Yes, you did. And thank God you did. Yay! Yeah, I was in New York years ago, and I was talking to Casey Childs in a bar. That's when you could go to bars and restaurants, and he was telling me about this amazing play that they had just finished doing, where everybody was just so moved and weeping, and everybody needed a box of Kleenex afterwards. And he said, you have to read this play, and we read it at the Fountain and loved it, and we were so glad we did. So bravo to you, Michael. Thank you.
Yes.
And finally,
That you guys did.
Simon?
Hi, Simon Levy, and I directed both plays.
Yes, you did. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Great. Well, it's great to have all of you here. So before we get started and talk about these specific two productions, I'm always interested in origin stories, about our own origin stories, not only about where we were born and where we grew up, but the origin of our theatrical selves. I don't know about you, but many of us, many actors, directors, playwrights, theater people, we have a magic moment, that aha moment when we were kids, when we were a child. Either we're sitting in the audience watching a play or a certain performance, or there was a teacher maybe at a school or in a class that turned you on to the art form. And I'm wondering if any of you have that magic moment to share when you were young and you saw that play or that performance or met that teacher that made you feel like, this is what I wanted to do. You pointed at that and said, I want to do that. Anyone?
Yeah, I mean, when I was in third grade, I was cast as like a munchkin in the Wizard of Oz, like a high school production, because they needed like little kids. And I remember just falling in love with it and being like, Mom, I want to keep doing this. And hi, Mom. But then eventually, like a couple years later, she got me into like a bunch of the theater programs in town, and I've been doing it ever since. I just love it.
Munchkin, nice.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to start small, right?
I saw my sister in the musical Pirates and Penzance, and she played Mabel. And I remember watching her and thinking, I can be better at that.
Verton, where was that? Where was that?
That was at Vallejo High School, my hometown, Vallejo, California.
And how old were you?
I was probably 10 or 11 at that time. Yeah. I think it was like 10.
Yeah.
I have not.
Go ahead, Tim.
When I was 11, I had a teacher at my elementary school named Mrs. Ciccarella. That was her real name.
Ciccarella?
Ciccarella. Cindy Ciccarella. And she was the music teacher. And she came up to me in the hallway and she said, I want you to audition for the school play. I said, what's a play? I honestly had no experience of anything up to that point. Where I grew up on Long Island, it just wasn't a place where theater was fostered in any capacity. And so it was a play called Frankly Franklin. It was based on the life of a young Benjamin Franklin. And I went up there and I had to do a monologue and I had to sing and I had to do dance moves, and I had no prior knowledge whatsoever that I could do it as well as I could. And I booked the lead role, and that started the journey. And it was advantageous because I share a birthday with Ben Franklin. So that was kind of weird too. But it was just one of those situations in life where somebody saw something that I didn't even know was there. And then boom, it just started me on this journey. And I tracked her down on Facebook not too long ago, and I found her and I wrote her this letter thanking her for my life's journey. It's pretty extraordinary.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I think for many of us, we had a magic teacher that turned us on to the art form.
I have one. I also have one. When I was in 5th grade, I was in The King and I went to the Boston Children's Theater. The teacher was named Patricia Gleason, who died this year. She was really influential here in the Boston scene for a very long time. And I got cast as Louis in The King and I, the son. And I just remember doing it for kids. That was that was what it was. They'd bring kids to see kids. And I just thought that was so cool and inspiring that I was doing it for other children. And then the first night of previews, when I left, this woman was standing outside and she was recruiting people to audition for Leave It to Beaver, the remake. And I just thought, and she took me aside and she wanted me to audition. I thought, this is so cool. This isn't like soccer where it's kind of predictable what's going to happen. Like, I don't know what's going to happen next and what's going to happen after that. And since then, it was like a roller coaster. And she kind of really, she pointed me out of other people and she went, you, kind of like Tim. I had that moment where she saw something in me before I did. And I just thought, this is it. This is what I should be doing.
That kind of affirmation is so important when you're young. Thank you for that. Tim and Bill, let's start with the two of you, because your relationship on stage were the central anchors in both of these two productions, in both The Normal Heart and Daniel's Husband. And I was wondering if, did you two know each other before acting together? And how did that trust and that chemistry between you develop? Bill?
No, we didn't know each other before, did we? I can't remember. I feel like I've known Tim so long. I still feel like I'm married to Tim. That but we didn't know each other. I mean, we knew of each other. I had seen Tim in shows, and he's fantastic, but no, we didn't know each other. But it was very easy for me both times just to fall in love with him. I mean, hello, look at him.
Yeah, how can you not, right?
Oh, guys, my bandwidth.
Yeah, it's a very impressive bandwidth. No, it was very easy to, although, at the beginning of Normal Heart, I wasn't sure I was going to like him or not. I wasn't sure. We have kind of a different approach to things. And remember, we met at Simon's house. We met at Simon's house in the dining room, and Tim had research and things and papers and all kinds of things and research and pictures. And I was
your binder, Tim. Show your binder.
Yeah, Tim has a binder. Tim's got a binder.
If you can pick it up, yes.
Oh my God. And I thought, well, I don't know. I was just planning to show up and kind of look at him and try to fall in love. That was all I was. That's why he's so good.
I'm sorry, I'm a geek. I'm like a gamer, except in theater.
Tim, what was it like coming back together with Bill to do Daniel's Husband after experiencing The Normal Heart together? Both of you were a few years older and lived a little more life, and things that happened to each other personally and in the country, and had grown as artists. Was it different? Or was it like getting right back on the horse and riding again?
In a way, it felt like a continuation, because the fact that you guys there at the Fountain brought us all together as a cast in The Normal Heart, we've all stayed so close in the intervening years. We were always getting together. We were getting together and like going out to dinner and doing game rooms and people coming over to my house. And so you guys really birthed a really beautiful family, and Bill and I were always seeing one another and always hanging out anyway. So when the opportunity came up for you guys to reunite us, it didn't feel so much like any kind of a reunion. It just felt like a continuation of this love fest that had been created doing The Normal Heart. Because when you do a play like that with people, I mean, that's like a band of brothers. You create, it's like you walk through the fire together doing a show like that, the commitment that it takes. And so that really bonded us strongly. And it just felt like, another room in the same house going back to do Daniel's Husband. And interestingly enough, there are a couple of similarities in it, even though it's such a different play. But in both plays, the character that I portrayed had to fight very much for who he loved. That was the sort of through line in both of them. And I think that's really beautiful.
And in Normal Heart, Ned was an alter ego of Larry Kramer, I think we can clearly say. And did playing Ned, inhabiting Ned, make you feel connected to Larry Kramer in some way? And how did that make you respond when he passed away this month?
I was scared of Larry Kramer when I first came upon him, when I was coming into myself in New York City in the early 90s. I was at NYU, and I remember a lot of my teachers, my Shakespeare teacher, one of my voice and speech teachers, were dying of AIDS. They had lesions on their faces. It was a scary time. There were condoms everywhere you went. and silence equals death t-shirts everywhere. And it was a huge risk to decide to be intimate with anybody. And I remember the gay bookstore in Chelsea, and they had this sort of homage to Larry Kramer, and I was kind of afraid of him at that time. But then having the opportunity to portray him, I felt very differently. I watched the documentary How to Survive a Plague many times during that play to keep me in the spirit and the energy that I needed to be. And that made me feel closer to him. It made me feel like it was okay for me to match the amount of emotion and anger that he needed to activate what he was trying to activate, to be an activist, activism, all of that anger. At first, I wasn't quite sure how to do it. And then I was like, forget it. I'm going to do it in the spirit that he would want it done.
I feel like we need a Larry Kramer for our current plague. You know, somebody really fierce advocate to just get everybody going, you know?
There's an article I read today. Somebody wrote a small thing in Vogue, and maybe I'll find the link and send it over, but it was somebody who was talking about exactly that. How Larry Kramer taught them to activate, how to use their anger for positivity, and what are we going to do now that we have this other plague? And it feels in a lot of ways like the same thing, because that plague in the early 80s was affecting a marginalized group of people, and so nobody cared. And now this plague, when the administration found out who it was affecting more, marginalized people and people who don't have money, they decided they don't care anymore about it, right?
Yeah, just as the Reagan administration was silent, now we have this administration that's silent. You know, crazy.
Yeah.
I was wondering for a long time when Larry Kramer would pass away. Sometimes I wondered if he would outlive us all. He felt mythical in that way. I
think he's going to remain mythical. I think that his stature will only grow as time goes on. He truly was a Cassandra screaming out, and nobody listened. And
he was a prophet.
Everyone ought to have. And I'm sure that Michael will be able to talk about what an influence he's had on writers. You know.
Oh, no question. No, he was. You look at there's the two plays that are the standards that reset the standard back in the day, and that is The Normal Heart and Angels in America. Those two plays, not only as I don't want to even pigeonhole it by saying as a gay playwright, because I think there's so much more. To me, the passion and the intelligence and the tenacity that are in both those plays, I think they're more than just gay stories. I think there's an anger and like I said, a tenacity in both those plays that speaks volumes, and at the same time completely serves and lifts the LGBTQ community just by nature of presenting those stories to straight audiences. As a young gay man, because it was before I was a playwright, I found them incredibly inspiring. And then when I started writing, they were the first. That's the God's honest truth. They were the first plays that I went to when I started my writing career. And certainly,
and as you know, Larry kept speaking out up until the very, very end, you know, up until this year, he was speaking out because most people are so silent on the whole HIV crisis, you know, around the world and don't know that, you know, 40 million people are infected still. 750,000 people a year still die from it. But where's the conversation? You know, we always tend to want to just move on. It's sad.
Can I say something about the writing too? And Michael, I want to include you in this. I think what's wonderful about Mark Crowley, who we also lost recently, about you and about Larry Kramer, as we're speaking about the anger and stuff, but lucky for someone who like me, that my voice is only used when I'm an actor. I'm so chicken to get on Facebook and fight with anyone. But I've gotten to speak and voice in the band and the Normal Heart as Mickey and in Daniel's Husband. It's not just the anger, it's the humor and the intelligence with which you guys tell the story that you're telling. And I am gay. And as a gay actor, I mean, it's kind of been like a giant chapter of This Is Your Life, because each one of them have been in specific periods of my life and in specific periods in history that speak to me very directly, but in a way that's braver, more intelligent, funnier, and angrier than I would ever express as Ed. So I am like hugely grateful to have been involved in Daniel's Husband for that reason, and eternally grateful, as I think we all should be for Larry Kramer.
Absolutely, and you're absolutely right. The way to get people to start listening, again, is through humor. You use that as a tool to get the message across, and again, and in the hands of wonderful actors with a really gifted director, it makes all the difference in the world. It's always a pleasure to see. And you kind of sneak your message in between the laughs, and that's
and you did that so beautifully, Michael.
Beautifully.
You know, so exquisitely crafted, the way that you brought us into humor, brought us into the humanity of these people, and then you just took us on this roller coaster. It was just, the audience at the end was just thrilled because they were in touch with so many different emotions, you know? It was beautiful.
Now, Lisa, your character in The Normal Heart, like Jenny O'Hara's in Daniel's Husband as Daniel's mother, the two of you, interestingly enough, were the sole female characters in each of these two plays. And both of these two women were strong-willed women fighting for what they believed to be right. Yes. So talk to me about your character's strength of purpose.
I think you just said it. I mean, she was I think she was another voice of Larry's. So it was just this woman with this fierce determination to save as many people as possible, no matter what anyone said. She didn't care. It's just, this is what we're going to do. Whereas, you know, Jenny's character, I think it's more, she's trying to save her son, but certainly with a fierce determination. It's lovely to have some women characters in these plays.
Michael,
I wish Dr. Burks was as ferocious as your character, Lisa.
And Michael, the character that Jenny played, Daniel's mother, triggered a lot of post-show conversation. That character did. You know, and she fought for what she believed was right for her son. And was it difficult for you, Michael, to get on her side of that argument?
No, in fact, I was. It's so funny. It would have been so easy to write her as a villain, as a cliche mother who didn't want to have a gay son. I thought, how interesting would it be to have her be the ultimate ally, the woman who loved having a gay son and who wanted them to get married, and then just by nature of her being a mother, wanting to take control of her son. That was a major part of her character, and in all the productions, it's always been a push. And Jenny was brilliant at it, as you saw. of making sure that she had all these dimensions. And it's really interesting for me to talk to people afterwards. This happened a number of performances after the LA production, where people would come up to me and say, I understood the mother's point of view. I got it. I understood. As opposed to saying, mind you, there are people who just thought she was, awful as well. But I love that. I love the fact that, depending on how you looked at her, you took different things away for what her motives were and what her drive was. And that's what the character needed to be. So yeah,
well, that comes from the great writing.
Not be just an overbearing woman who didn't want her son to be gay.
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I was going to say that's great writing and the wonderful acting of Jenny O'Hara, but I really also want to say that Simon is a director who works extremely hard to find the humanity and the truth and the love in all the characters, and never goes for a black and white easy answer ever. And I think that the reason these productions have been so full-bodied is because of his quest to do that.
Thank you for saying that.
I remember Simon you and I talking about that character of Daniel's mother and how adamant you were about her not being a cliche.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
I can remember in rehearsal that.
Yeah, and when I read the play, and then after I saw it, the off-Broadway production in New York, and I remember that I was flying back thinking about the casting, of it, and Jenny just came into my head, and I think that the reason for that is because it was really important to get the humor of that character before the play turns. Do you know what I mean? And to be able to fall in love with her, for the audience to fall in love with her, through the humor, and that was really important. And I knew that Jenny could do that, and then to turn, and then suddenly you have this very driven and sort of uncaring person fighting for her position,
When I read the play, I said to you on the phone, Simon, I'd be more inclined to do this if you'll get Jenny to play the mom, because a huge part of the character that I played's journey has to do with that character. And I had wanted to work with Jenny for a really, really long time. I knew that there would be really good fireworks in terms of all of the scenes that they had together, those two characters. So it's pretty amazing that you were thinking about it, and I was too, and I called you and said, yeah, if we could get Jenny. So, and I knew also that she was, she's a fountain favorite. She's like a staple, she's a very grounding force at that theater.
Right, so audiences would naturally invest in her just as soon as she came out on stage, exactly, which is what you wanted. I have a question for Dan, Jeff, and Ray. In Normal Heart, talk to me about how a group of actors become an ensemble. When I think of Normal Heart, there are, of course, these powerful characters, but there was also that ensemble. And I'm wondering, Dan, Jeff, or Ray, how does that sense of ensemble created?
And Verton, and the dressing room. Let's leave it at that. Lots of time in the dressing room.
But
talking and watching and listening.
Yeah, but I think one of the amazing things is, like, once I think we realized what we had to do, because the rehearsals was so broken up, and Simon did an amazing job of keeping us all focused. But once we realized the task at hand, and it was so heavy every night, and Tim had to remember all those names of all those people in that monologue. And we would sit backstage and say, thank God we didn't have to say that. But I think naturally what happened was we realized to make the drama outside on the stage work, we had to bring love and laughter backstage. And it instantly became this brotherhood of making fun of each other as much as humanly possible that brought out this love for each other that just, it made it a pleasure to show up, because it wasn't fun to do every night. It sometimes was a task, but the respect for the project, for the writing, and for the amount of effort that everyone was putting in, we just came with smiles and laughter. So
they made fun of my wall of pain every night. I had a huge section of the dressing room pasted with pictures of men who were dying from AIDS, and everyone would see it and be like, shrinking from the grief. But it helped me to have to look at that and understand that reality. But at the same time, yes, you guys all made fun of me for it, and I love you for that.
I also realized, I think preview weekend, it was maybe the first preview when I recognized how the reactions from the audience. And until you have an audience, you don't really kind of, know what's really going on, even though it can be scary. But people were in tears every night that I realized we have a responsibility. And that responsibility, a lot of people that have smaller roles can think, well, it's not that big of a deal. We realize that if one person's down, we're all down. And I remember Tim coming back at the end every night and being like sobbing or crying. And I realized, wow, we really have a bigger responsibility than I thought when we were rehearsing. And that's kind of when things went into high gear, I think, for us.
I want to say that I love that the Fountain did all those talkbacks with all those experts. I think they were so important for the audience. To have a time to kind of accept and compartmentalize and realize what had just happened because it was so emotional. So it was really wonderful that you guys did that.
I also think. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Tim.
I was just going to say, I concur, Lisa, because people had so many questions. And it was the same thing with Daniel's husband. People were so eager to ask their questions or to speak something that they had to get out of them after having that experience. The Fountain is such a deeply intimate space. And I think that there's an exchange happening. It's like a palpable exchange. And so all of those talkbacks are so important. And I think it's important for us as casts because it helps you to decompress and it helps you to be able to see the faces of the people that you just gave your soul to. I think that exchange is so essential.
I think of everything that I've ever done, the Normal Heart has given the greatest audience response. Like people start sobbing early in the show and it doesn't stop until after we've left the stage, after bows and everything. And I've never experienced that kind of reaction. My time at UCLA or Yale, none of it, any production I've ever done. I think it's testament to Larry Kramer and what he wrote at the time that it was all occurring, and just connection to those raw feelings and emotions.
What I wanted to add is I always felt every night that the talkbacks were a continuation of the play, that there was no way I wasn't going to be there because it felt like, I don't know, maybe my character, the doctor, whatever, but that I had to be there to embrace this humanity that was just like, it's still, even though this play is dealing with an issue from a long time ago, everyone had present emotions and feelings and people they knew right now who were going through this and going through that. And it was so present for the audience. So it was just really
memories of people that they know that died of AIDS, back all the way back into the 80s.
And that's what I wanted to bring, audience engagement and memories of those lost. Simon, tell us about the message board that was out front of the theater during the run of the Normal Heart, the AIDS wall. And then we also did the same thing with Daniel's husband, the love board, we called it. Outside of Daniel's husband. Simon, just briefly tell us about those two message boards outside the theater and what they gave to the audience.
Well, I think that, for me, they were an extension of what I was feeling, that the need to express, the need to be able to say something and more importantly, to honor the people, especially in Normal Heart, to honor the people who we had lost. I mean, that was the main reason that I wanted to do the play in the first place, was to honor those people that I lost in San Francisco. So I wanted the audience to be able to have an opportunity to express that as well. And it was amazing. It was amazing, the tributes, that were expressed both for Normal Heart and for Daniel's husband.
And Simon, for those watching who may not know what the message boards were, Simon, can you just quickly describe what they were?
Yeah, they were an opportunity for the audience to post messages to people, in the case of Normal Heart people who they had lost, to just be able to write their name. I mean, it was sort of our quilt in a way. Do you know what I mean? And then, of course, the love board for Daniel's husband is to be able to say something about somebody that you loved. I suppose, whether they passed, but more, people who you were in love with now and you wanted to honor, because at the heart of Daniel's husband is to love one another, right? And to embrace each other and not to be afraid of that. And in the way of Larry Kramer, to do that fiercely, to love fiercely.
Well, after the show reunited Daniel's husband, there was the same feeling of people needing to speak. They needed to talk about it. You guys provide, even when there aren't talkbacks, there's the awesome cafe upstairs where people were hanging out and people wanted to speak. And I think it opened the eyes of a lot of people, a lot of mothers who wanted to talk afterwards, a lot of men who wanted to talk about partners they had lost. I mean, Ed say, Fernando, you remember being up there, how passionate people felt.
Absolutely. And that's if you even made it up to the cafe. I mean, the minute that we walked outside, and the gift of that, people wanted to shed. They wanted to put it out right then and there. And it was, I'm feeling it right now. I'm getting goosebumps. It's like you're making me feel pain and realizing how much I miss it and how amazing that was. So call me when we're doing the revival. I realize now we have to wait longer than usual. But yes, Bill is right on it. The minute we stepped out on the sidewalk and the completely unfiltered reaction that I think the audience members themselves didn't even realize was so unfiltered, and it just had to come out. It was such a kinesthetic experience and such a wonderful experience, whether it was crying or laughing and celebrating love. A lot of the Daniel board had notes of love to people who indeed had passed also, who they had lost. And it was just so special.
Isn't it remarkable that here we are, on Zoom, being shut down in the pandemic and unable to do our work, and our theaters are closed, but just talking about the kinetic, visceral experience of live theater. And here we are sharing memories and feelings about this tangible, physical thing that actors have with audiences and human beings share together in one space that is, especially
you guys, this is the Fountain Theater. I think this is what the Fountain does so well, because I have left the theater as an audience member on many other shows, The Cost of Living, Ballad of Emmett Till, and felt like those same kinds of feelings. And you guys, it's a tribute to you.
I felt that way about Broomstick.
It's really very much a sense of pride. Like, going back to me being able to be a part of this production, it really meant a lot to me to be a part of an ensemble of people who were like me, and to have found that. So that is when I look at Pride and Pride Month, to find a group of people and knowing that it's bigger than me, it's just bigger than you, and knowing that you're not alone. Growing up being an actor, I think all gay actors are great actors because you have to grow up acting, and you have to grow up trying to behave and survive this world to find a place, to have found the Normal Heart. And I wrote letters to Simon, and I begged, because I really wanted to be a part of this production as an understudy, even to be a part of this, to observe, to really kind of sit in all the rehearsals and to really be grateful to that. So that's hats off to the Fountain.
Well, let's talk about that for a moment. How have gay roles and the gay stories being told in TV, film, and in plays changed since the productions of these two plays in the past handful of years? I mean, have they changed? Have gay roles and gay stories that are being told in these art forms changed? Or if they haven't, what kind of change do you want to see?
I feel like sorry.
Go ahead, Jose. Go ahead.
I feel like it's still very much like the coming out story. Like, oh, here is so and so, and they have to be X, Y, and Z, and like we're still kind of like going into finding out that these characters are gay and like having them fall in love with people, as opposed to just like how Daniel's husband does it, where it's like, oh, we're just all like people here in a room, like having a good time, and we all have like that mutual respect. I feel like in film and TV anyway, it's still very much so the coming out story, or like the sexual deviant, or things along that line that still haven't fully progressed, seeing us as fully people. Yeah.
So Jose, are you saying, which is true, I think, of other groups, that these characters are only dramatized in how they are in opposition of the other, the gay character versus in a straight world, or being in confrontation with a straight world. It's like the deaf community. So many of deaf plays are about the battle between the deaf and the hearing community, instead of just being a play about human beings who happen to be deaf, or characters who just happen to be Black. And it's not about race at all. It's just about being a human being in this world. Is that what you mean, Jose?
That's exactly what I mean. Yeah. Thank you for saying it more concisely.
No. I'm picking up on what you're saying and how true that is. Anybody else?
Yeah, I want more stories of gay people in positions of power and doing things. I want more stories like The Normal Heart. I don't want all the gay stories where stuff just happens to you and you have to deal with it. In The Normal Heart, all of them had to activate to conquer a problem. And a lot of stories, especially film and TV, it's just sort of, they feel victim-y to me.
Yeah.
And so the more stories that allow people to step into their power or go on a journey to realize their power, and it doesn't necessarily have to be around their sexuality. It doesn't have to be the coming out story. It doesn't have to be the, oh, now we're normal. Now society accepts us as gay men and we can get married and have children. But boy, is that going to be strange for the neighbors. It's like, I want the stories to evolve. I want the mythologies to ascend. I don't exactly know what that means. I haven't seen or read The Inheritance, but I feel like that's kind of the hot top. Did anyone see or read that one?
Yes.
And what was your feeling about that?
I do believe that it is more because it is kind of tailored on Howard's End. It does give a different kind of perspective on life. I want to speak to characters like now, because I play a majority of my characters I play are of the LGBTQ community, and it depends. It literally just depends on who's in charge of the show, how the character is written, or how the character is portrayed, and the place where the show is presented also has a major significance on it. And I think that roles are getting better, and there are more and varied kind of like roles, but it's still on the outskirts of everything, kind of like, and I think there's an intersection for me as well, with being Black and also being gay, queer. There's an intersection that further marginalizes on the outside of that. So, but I think it's increasing. Actually, I'm starting working on something tomorrow, a series called Commisery, which is like a Zoom series with Amy Hill, by Quentin Lee. And it kind of And the character is very, very different than I've actually done, and I'm kind of excited about it. But it's like it takes different filmmakers and to kind of get that out into the world.
I just want to just say a little bit, since I'm the only woman here, that when we say about gay characters, let's not forget about women,
Correct.
Gay women, because I think there are even less plays about gay women than gay men. And just recently, a producer that I know, right before the pandemic happened, they were producing last summer at Bluefish Cove, because it's the only play about gay women that has been successful. So they were going to revive it. I don't know what's going to happen now, but I think that when we say gay, most of the time we think men, and we got to remember the women.
White men. I think we think white men.
What?
No, I think we think gay white men is what we really think of often. Yeah.
So I just wanted to throw that out.
I will say there's been a little bit of progress, because when we did The Normal Heart, my writing partner and I had written a feature film in which the lead just happened to be a gay kid, and we took it around to some people, and the feedback we got was, it's pretty gay, and it really wasn't that gay at all. And we were told, gay movies don't make money, one producer said to us.
What?
And we're like,
oh, please.
Whoa. And we're like, it's a post Will and Grace world, but it was still in this weird place where there really wasn't a lot. And since then, we've had things like Pose and so many other really interesting shows in television where I think it's breaking some ground in the gay world, that it'd be great to see that broader in the theater world as well, more successful lesbian plays. And as we're saying, not just the typical coming out story, because that's the typical story everyone knows, but the intricacies of something like Daniel's Husband really did really well, of relationships of people. So
I'm
a little bit of progress.
I'm reading all these different types of plays, but they're never presented. That's the frustrating thing about this whole situation. I'm reading lots of things about different queer playwrights and different stories. They never make it to the round of even getting, a workshop production. And something I really enjoy about the Fountain Theater is that the playwrights, I'm forgetting the name of the playwright cycle that you do, where you do a small section of the plays. But then,
rapid development.
Yeah.
Yes. Rapid development. That is very necessary, because I have a lot of friends. I went to Yale. I have a lot of friends that are writing constantly. Their stuff never sees the light of day. And I'm constantly reading stuff. I know Tim is constantly reading things. And that's something that we all have to kind of reconcile. What things are being seen and who's being seen and all of that stuff. And someone asked a question about like shows and film and TV, like something that you would see on TV on CBS, how queer people are represented, is a lot different than how you'll see like on HBO. And so that's just the way it is.
In the Disney version of being gay.
Yes.
Let me ask you this.
I feel there's been a lot. I'm very, very optimistic because, some of us are older and been doing this for a long time. And I have seen gay characters become more and more full-bodied, more and more real, more and more true. I mean, that is what I love doing about Daniel's Husband, is I really felt like these were people that I knew. I mean, I read the dialogue and I thought, this is us. This is so true. There's nothing put on for like a straight audience or trying to be like, camp or something. It was all just, this is like a bunch of guys hanging out.
And it does seem like we're kind of like in that wave where like these characters are becoming more full-bodied, but now we also have to start casting LGBT people in those roles. We can't just keep giving them to straight actors, because we also need the representation. And it's a thing that's definitely lacking in film and television.
Yeah. So you know how The Inheritance is supposed to come to the Geffen? I think it was supposed to be this year, but it's going to end up being next year, right? They got it as its first post Broadway. And I remember reading that and thinking, great, so we can look forward to it being all stars, number one, and number two, being all pretty much straight people. And I started to go a little Ned Weeks in my head, and I was like, the strongly worded letter that I was going to write and send to whoever would read it over there. But yeah, I'm with you on that point, Jose, because I feel like there's a shortage of gay actors
in Hollywood, in LA?
Yes. Yes, Tim.
There is?
There must be.
Wait a minute.
So we're heading down the home stretch here, but I want to ask a question following up on this very topic. For all of you as actors, actresses, playwrights, director even, when you're doing plays like these that address these large social issues, are you aware that when do you become aware that you are also speaking for a community? Do you feel as an actor who is gay or a playwright that you are also speaking for a community, or how do you keep your work personal and not take on that responsibility?
I can never think of it that then it's not specific detailed work. With the Normal Heart, the only time that I felt that I realized that I was part of this thing was when we had the audience reaction. But when we're working on the play, it's just, we're working on the play. And I think that that's a testament to Simon too, who just keeps us on track. We have to do what we have to do. But if we start thinking of ourselves as symbols, that would be, I don't know.
I agree with Lisa. I experienced it both with Boys in the Band and Normal Heart. I'm just concentrating on the character, but you start to hear, even in rehearsal before the audience response, Lisa, I started to hear a lot from the gay community about how stereotyped Boys in the Band was, how angry Normal Heart was, and so on a bigger social level and on a bigger political level within the gay community itself, there were two sides coming at me. And I did choose personally to not engage too much because I was thinking about my character in the play. But you do realize as those responses start to come, the triggers, the buttons that will be pushed and the responsibility that you have for the piece as a whole. But I think, as Lisa said, staying within your circles, as Madeline Kahn used to say, and just be in your little circles, because otherwise my head would blow.
I'm very aware of how my characters are perceived, everyone that I play. I think part of it is I feel a responsibility to all of my communities to present full-fledged characters. And something like in The Normal Heart, Tommy was written on Roger McFarlane, who wasn't Black. But I do recognize Larry's feelings that he felt that he missed the mark on having people of color, Black people, and women included in the play. And so I was being very mindful of that and making sure my presence in my 3 scenes was impactful, yet very true and full. And it I think it amplified my performance, and everything that I do, I think about that all the time. I always think about how I'm perceived as me, Verton Banks, my race, Black, and my sexuality.
Very brave of you.
And I agree a lot with that, Verton. I think it's a huge, yes, like Lisa said, you have to focus on the work, because if not, it's not going to get done. But it's also a privilege to kind of not think about those greater scales. I'm Latinx, I'm queer. We represent those people and those demographics, because a lot of times they don't get to see themselves represented. And maybe that's the whole racial thing. We don't have to go there, but I think sometimes you do have to be aware of how people are perceiving you, because in Daniel's husband, I was the youngest one. So from the very beginning, from the rehearsal process, it was always okay, well, what's this generation's perspective on X, Y, and Z? And I had to stop and think about, okay, well, what is our perspective on these things because I was the only one speaking for us. And yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
Well, let's, the time that we have left, let's just quickly turn to the chat room because we have a couple of questions that I want to share with you. This question is for Verton, and the question is, in what ways does the place where the show is being performed impact you as an actor in the play?
Well, I think it depends on the audiences. I think that there are places where stuff is really experimental, like Yale Cabaret. Stuff that I did at Yale Cabaret is completely different than anything I would do at the Fountain or CTG. Like, that's just how it happens to be. Like, but maybe one day some of the stuff we did at Yale Cabaret will be it's very challenging. Very challenging. Thank you.
Anyone else have a comment about how the space that you're acting in impacts you as an actor? The difference between performing at an intimate theater like the Fountain versus being on stage at the Amundsen?
I mean, just the technical aspects of it. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, for the Normal Heart, literally Tim was yelling at people 5 feet away from him, and you could physically feel them like sink back in, but it made such an impact to the audience that they were in it. They're not the Amundsen where they're like, well, that's very nice. Like, we brought them into our fight, and whether they liked it or not, they heard his words.
And they would have heard it at the last row of the Amundsen too. I'm loud. I can't help it. I'm half Sicilian.
Here's a quick question for the group. Anyone from either production. How did Simon, as the director of both plays, and all of you performers and the playwright as well, how do you handle the feelings of rage that are present in both plays? And did that leak into your non-theater life at all? Of course, Tim wrote a piece about that very subject, about how wrestling with Ned Weeks in this play impacted his personal life. Anyone want to speak on that? How swimming in these dark waters affects your offstage life when you go home after a performance?
Well, Simon creates a very, very safe space, and because Simon creates such a safe space, it feels actually like there aren't any walls there to it's weird. It feels like there aren't walls there to hold you in, but if you fall, you won't get hurt because it'll be like one of those bouncy castles. So there's kind of limitless space on either side. And I think that's where it starts to seep in to your personal life, because you're not creating boundaries or walls around the work. You're letting an exchange come and go as it needs to. And Simon is also very easy to bring anything to that you're struggling with. A question about a character, a question about a line, a question about the existential crisis of identity. Like, he's just there for you. It's a give and take. There's like I felt like I could be very neutral and let people project what they needed to onto me, but at the same time be very particular and very specific of who I am. And I don't experience that with most directors. So that's to Simon's credit. I don't know how it is that you manage how you bring that into a workroom, but I've noticed that specifically on the pieces that we've worked on, which are not easy pieces. Let's be honest.
No, I think in both productions, it was about feeling safe. That you could go where you needed to go emotionally, and that the other person in the scene or persons in the scene would be there for you. And I think we really achieved that in a really heartful way in both productions. Because some of the characters had to go to some pretty emotional places.
And those kinds of emotions, you don't just switch off with a flick of a button or turn off like a faucet. And that's the water in which an actor swims. And it's not easy to, I would imagine, to give a performance or have a rehearsal and then get in your car and drive home and walk in the door, and there's your partner, and they want to talk about the electric bill or what's for dinner, and do you want tomato sauce or clam chowder, and your head is just exploding, and you've just given your spleen. What is that like? How do you need time to detox and kind of unwind, or do a lot of drugs, or what?
Well, I remember several performances after it was all done. Tim and Stephen O'Mahony and Fred and I and several others, Verton, Dan, Bill, would go up to the roof, to the cafe, but when it was the back little patio thing, and just sit for an hour and have a beer or a sparkling water or whatever and decompress. And it was about the day more than anything else, but we had to stay together to help let it go and to ease back into normal life.
It was really, I think it's one of the toughest pieces I've ever done. All my Shakespeare, all the Chekhov, everything. I think it's the emotional connection to the piece, but it was really tough. Like in rehearsals, I think I was commentating on during rehearsals, and even that switch was hard, even though both were in the medical areas, and that switch was kind of hard. And when we were doing the show, I just didn't do anything. I think I did one job, like one outside job during the show. The other time I was just like, I can't focus enough. Like my body would shut down up until an hour before the show, and then it would shut down again. It was just a weird.
And I think poor Bill in Daniel's husband, having to experience that catatonic state on stage and go entirely inward and be frozen on every night to be locked up or locked down syndrome, and then.
Where did you go there, Bill?
Yeah.
Where did you go?
Shopping at Trader Joe's. He was just shopping at Trader Joe's.
Tomato sauce, clam chowder.
Exactly. I think it's a tribute to what you talk about, that being able to drop all of it when we go is about the camaraderie. And honestly, in both of these shows, the dressing rooms experience has been about the best ever. In both shows, some of my happiest moments sitting back there in that dressing room, and with these guys, with Jenny, it was very easy to kind of laugh it all off and go back to a normal sort of state.
Yeah,
I think that's why we've remained so close as well, because everybody saw each other very vulnerable. We feel we went through something all together, and I think on both shows we have felt like we're true company, like a real company.
Right.
And it's lasted.
And I feel like this gathering today has been like a backstage, gathering, or like we're all up in the Fountain Cafe out on the patio on the deck drinking wine, and looking out at the stars and just projecting. So
I wish.
I know, exactly. So let's just hope that we can all get there and do that as soon as we possibly can, and get back to where we belong, doing what we should be doing and are meant to be.
Please.
So thank you, everybody. We're out of time. That's it. Really, what a wonderful, wonderful gathering of hearts and souls this was today. I'm gonna hold on to this conversation for a few days and just let it simmer there. So thank you, everybody, from the Normal Heart and Daniel's husband. So that's it for Theater Talk for today.
I love you all. I love you all.
Love you too. Miss everybody.
Simon, which cast was better? Simon, which cast was better?
That note.
It's up on mute. Mute Simon.
Yeah, exactly. Simon's going to mute himself now.
He'll text you. He'll text you.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you so much.
Bye. Bye.